Hello, this is Gene. It's been a while since I've talked to you guys, but today I decided to watch a couple of movies today, and I turned on the Breakfast Club. And most people know who this movie is. It came out like in mid '80s. Um, I think how it starts up, it's supposed to be like in 1984. Now I graduated from high school in 1983, so obviously when that movie came out. I definitely identified with a couple people in the movie, and I've always wondered why, after now it's been 35 years, I guess, they never did a sequel on it. But I don't really talk about movies that much on this channel. I have my other channel that I do that, and I don't really talk in that um, channel that much anymore because I think the stuff I'm doing is more important on this channel. You know, waking up the white man. But the reason why it's a good movie to go back, somebody my age to go back and just realize the type of how it was back then. I don't like to be somebody who says I want to go back and say it was always better in the back, always better years and years ago. You know, when the reason why a lot of people on the left get upset when we say make American great again, they think that we want to go back to the 50s, and I guess we want to lynch people, whatever. Just more of a different time back then. They didn't have the internet. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these people have HDHD and our even though we like to daydream a lot. I mean, I did in my life when I was young. Clearly, if I was alive today and going to school, they would have diagnosed me with some sort of autistic type issues, attention issues. But the movie really stands the time. You know, it is. I hate to say it's a masterpiece for American cinema. For what it does, it takes the subject matter of teenagers in high school and becomes more mature with it. They have conversations that are well upgrade, really above what was going on at that time. Because unfortunately, in modern theater movies, people are getting more and more stupid. It's just let's just see how crazy somebody can do it, and we have another movie and see how crazy these teenagers are going to do. And you know, when you're teenagers now in movies, are basically expecting that you're going to have sex all the time. And one of the refreshing things in this movie is that clearly, at least 20 or 60% of the people that were in the movie, the teenagers, were virgins. I'm going to say that Judd Nelson's character wasn't, because he was the bad boy. And I would think that Emilio Estevez probably wasn't as well, but he never really said one or not, or he never said he wasn't. But the two girls were, and Anthony Michael Hall, the brain, was also a virgin. You can't really. I mean, if you had that conversation now, people would, even though we've kind of become a different type of thing. But well, I wanted to just talk about this movie and how it relates to what the alt-right is, or what advocating for the white race, because there's so much in this movie. People talk about the boomers. The boomers would have been the parents of these kids in their 40s at that time, and now in their 70s or 80s now. And a lot of people in the alt-right just have this issue with the boomers. It's just interesting to see how this movie kind of like dealt with those five children having issues with their parents, and how they were dealing with it, and how the parents couldn't really understand them. And it was probably the start of this phase of where we said, well, we're not going to make children at that age to be responsible for anything. That just by giving them standards, that was being too much pressure on them. Clearly, each one of these people in this movie had some sort of issues. And I guess when this movie came out, they were thinking possibly that by talking to them, this is under like the Dr. Spock type of thing, you know. So we are basically told that the parents were really the perpetrators of all the issues in this thing. When probably the best thing they could have done is they could have showed more. But of course, if they showed more, like them at home before they came to school that morning, the movie would have been well over 2 hours. and it's perfectly for the time that it's spent in the movie. It's probably John Hughes' best movie ever, and he's had a couple good movies, but this movie actually dealt with more important things. But it's just interesting, and the reason why, just when I watch a movie like that, I have to say that it does take me back, and I have to say that I probably equate with Anthony Michael Hall's character and Ali Sheedy's character, like combined, because I was a very smart person. I never had any suicidal type of thoughts. That type of thing wasn't really a thing. My parents obviously wanted me to do better in school, but I didn't do very well. I know that I was probably probably the most smartest person in those classes, but I just didn't want to do it. I didn't really want to be there. I can't say that I'm like Judd Nelson's character in that movie, Bender, because I still follow the rules. I wouldn't do anything against the rule. Now I would ditch a lot of school, but my father was an ex-Marine, and he would have, if he'd have known I did shit like that, I would have been beat the shit out of. So, but years after that, I always was happy that he did that. He gave me standards to have. And I know I'm kind of rambling here, but it's going to get to a point, hopefully. So I was in between those two. So when I see the movie, maybe the day when it came out, I was like, oh wow, this is really interesting, and it's very similar to the type of experience that I had. But I didn't have the ability to be in a group with those 5 people and all of a sudden be accepted in that afternoon. I was never really accepted. And it really took me to leave and go to the Air Force to be away from everything else and have to be together as a team, that eventually people looked at me differently and gave me a time of day. Because kids at that age can be very self-absorbed. And if it doesn't affect them, or if it does affect them, and it's something they don't want, they will basically kill you in their own way. And you see that throughout this movie. But the interesting thing about this movie, and I still think it's one of the best movies in the 1980s, I always wondered if they were going to do a sequel to this, because all the actors are still alive. Now, the director died in 2009, and he never had any sequels of any of his movies. But I would think it'd be interesting to see how they came back and now their parents and what their kids are going through. If Bender is not in jail, or if Molly Ringwald, if she becomes the alcoholic mother because nobody really loved her, or what happens with Estevez or Anthony Michael Hall, I guess. It'd be interesting to see how that would have played out. Now, I think it could have been done about 10 years ago while John was still alive, and they looked more attractive now because, to be honest, they have not really aged very well. Not any of them. It's shocking to see, kind of, because they're my age now. And I know I'm not the greatest looking dude ever, and obviously if I had like a hair paste or something like that, I could look like a little bit younger. I mean, people like Clooney and these guys do this stuff so they look younger. Would have been nice to see what they would have done with it. Now, of course, we're in this time where we remake everything. This would not really be a remake. This would be a sequel, and I guess you could have it their own version of the Breakfast Club. How you get them all together, and maybe those kids are in the same type of area, and they could talk about the issues that our kids are going through right now. Now, it's interesting to see back in the 80s that there was pressures on young men to do well. Both of the, there's 3 boys. One didn't have a real good father in the home, but they all had fathers in the home. And the Estevez character and Hall character had, they were just very pressured to do what they're, one was physical, you have to do this to get a scholarship as an athlete. The other one was you have to do this to have good grades to get to college. And back in the 80s, there wasn't this push that everybody has to go to college. And the colleges were a lot more selective back then. Now, most colleges, unless you're talking about the highest elite universities, will take pretty much anybody. And the model is now that they want everybody there, and they changed their curriculum over the last 30 or 40 years to stuff that's not really relevant. And that is why about 60% of people who go to college now are women. But what's strange has happened in this, and how it really relates to the alt-right and men's issues, is if I wish that in a lot of ways that type of parenting was going on right now with our boys. Tell our son that you have to win at all costs, that you're going to defend your family, you're going to do this. Now you have to have some sort of balance with that. Obviously you can't go too much with it, but we don't know enough to what's going on in their families. They each tell a little story about their family, but they don't actually see that maybe the father has been taking his son to practice or going to state tournaments at 4 o'clock in the morning, working twice shifts so he can go to these tournaments. And you don't understand that when you're 18 until you're in your 30s, and you realize, God, I can't believe what my parents did for me so I could have this type of stuff. Same thing with Michael characters as well. You know, they were laying down the law and said, we expect this out of you because you're going to be the future. And they talk about this in the movie. The teacher's name was talking to the janitor, and he said that the people have changed, the boys, everybody's changed so much. And he said, these people are going to be the ones that are going to be taking care of me when I get older. Now, that is the case. And the question is, has that Generation X has done the right things? I can't really say that they have, because as bad as everybody gets on the boomers, but it was the Generation X that allowed all the policies continually go on. You can't continually blame your parents in this situation. I can't sit there and say, I'm going to blame those who came before me. My parents, of course, they're both dead, but if they were in politics or they voted shit in, we had many, many chances to change this stuff and didn't do it. So it continually is on, and now the younger people might see in this and they want to blame whatever. It's kind of a circular thing. But the interesting thing is, when you go back and you see a movie like that, of course I reminisce and I say, what would I do if I had the opportunity? And everybody goes through this, right? You think, what would I have done if I was been 18? Because I was never popular. And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you on this channel. I mean, all my 285 subscribers, if I had access to certain things at that age, I might have done something. Now, that doesn't mean I glorify what like people in Columbine did or some of the other stuff that's happened. But there was a point that I was abused at school all the time. And until I actually grew, I was for about 14, I think it was about 5'2", 5'3", and all of a sudden, over one season, I grew like 10 inches, and all of a sudden people kind of left me alone. So that was kind of good too. But I always thought, what would I do? And then you say, what would have happened if I would have just maybe put myself a little bit more out there? Or if I had some of the advantages that some of the other people had. I went to a school now, if you went there, you would say it's almost a rundown type of school, because they built it in the 80s at the same times that I went there. I was the first class at the new building, so we had all the new shit. This is in the 80s. But I was from the other side of the track. I was working poor white people. Now back then we only had about 4 black people in our school. And I went back there a few years ago. I live in Florida now, and I went to school in school I went to high school in Florida, but on the other side of the state. So a few years I went and I drove over there and I saw what it is, and it's probably 80% black now, which is it's kind of shocking to me, to be honest. Not that it's good or bad. It is what it is. They do a lot better in athletics than they did when I went there. But regardless, but the interesting thing is, what would I have done any different? We're all given whatever this is that we have. And I feel kind of sorry for people that are 18, 19 now and dealing with the shit they have to do right now. It's totally different than it was. I have to say that we had a part of the incidents or innocence back then. It's strange to say in the 80s that we had innocence, because a lot of shit was going on, especially in like New York and stuff. Cocaine was around. There was a lot more murder back then. There was a lot more raping back then, but we didn't really know about it. It wasn't, teleported to our phone and said, "Hey, this happened today down the street." I mean, right now, somebody can put something down and say, "Hey, something happened 3 miles away." So, and people go there and see what's going on. So it's different, and it's one of those weird things when you go back and you listen to a movie like that, and you know that it's still relevant today, but it's almost shocking to see it because we don't really treat our kids that way anymore. It's like they watch this movie, and all of a sudden they said, "When I have kids, I'm not going to do what they did to these kids in the Breakfast Club," because our kids are basically soft now. So I'm at this point in my life, I'm actually more on the side of the teacher on this, and I think that happens to everybody, I have to say. I mean, I'm a little bit older than the people in the movie, I think. They were seniors and juniors probably, so they've been 3 or 4 years behind me. And but it's just interesting because you think that, and it happens to everybody. It's like you're liberal at first, and then you just become more conservative as you get older. You have kids, and you realize this is what's best for my family. But the interesting thing, and I keep saying the interesting thing, I was like, a few years ago when they talked about doing a sequel, they talked to Molly Ringwald, and she's like, she wasn't for it, against it, but she had to make a statement. She just say, well, it was too white back then, so if we ever going to do a reboot, it can't be all white again. So I said, first of all, there is rarely a movie in Hollywood since the 80s that didn't have their stars that were Jewish. So I said, I know that these people are Jewish. At least a couple of them are. Now, Judd Nelson I knew was, and he doesn't look like in the movie, but he is. He's a Jew. Molly Ringwald I think she has a Jewish mom, but she wasn't raised as a, well, maybe not. She might not be. But I know Ali Sheedy, that she has a Jewish mom. I think Molly Ringwald also has Jewish in her lineages. Estevez married a Jewish person, but I don't think he is through birth as a Jew. And Holf is not, as far as I can tell. So about 40%, or maybe either 40 or 60% of the teenage cast were Jewish. And she says, well, we can't have it all white. Well, the problem is, Jews are not white, okay? And you see this all the time when Jews project their biases on in media, and they say us white people have to get together and stop doing the stuff against the refugees or whatever, and they want to virtual schooling everything, and then when they get called out, they say, whoa, I'm Jewish, I'm not white. It's just interesting that I think that Molly Ringwald did the same thing when she was talking about doing a sequel to The Breakfast Club. Of course, there would never be, if they ever do a sequel to this, prequel, whatever, well, it can't be a prequel. It will be the most multiculturalist thing ever. You would have a trans person in the Breakfast Club. You'll have a gay person in it, or a lesbian person in it. You might have people that have parents that are same sex or some shit like that. You might have one white person. And if it's the white man, you know the white man is going to be shamed continually through the entire thing. They might do a parody of it, or they might have somebody come with a MAGA hat on and then say, they'll shame him and shame him and shame him, and at the end of the movie he'll have this awakening and says, oh, I can't believe I thought this type of thing. So as much as I would like to see a sequel to it, because I think for me, when I want to get retro and stuff, when I see it, movies like that, I wish, what would they could have done with it? Now apparently there is a deleted scene that the janitor talks about, like in 15 years in the future, that all this stuff was going on. Like Hall was in stocks and he died during the bullet bubble or whatever, and they had all this stuff. But you would think that that night, that one day that they were together, that might awaken them up. So that gets me back to what I talk about. That little movie can wake up. The idea that teenagers have feelings, that there's cliques in school, that how it can be very difficult for a teenager to go through school. We need that kind of for the alt-right as well, because what that image now, you look back at that movie, regardless of whether they're 40% Jewish, they portray a white kids. That's what they show this, but they show the privilege thing, which is great. That they show that there is a thuggish guy that's a white guy, so he doesn't come from privilege. The Hallie Sheedy character does not come from privilege. You see their cars, you know they don't have a whole lot of money. Anthony Michael Hall, the woman was driving a K car. So it showed all of it right there, and you can see that it was all based on class, not necessarily on race. Now we have identity politics, especially on the left, that they categorize us basically on the color of our skin. And then what do you think the reaction to that when you change policies and you make immigration or from people from areas that are not really part of our area, that you don't think there's going to be some sort of reaction to that? I think it should be a hell of a lot more than it is. I think we might wait too long, and what we think about America will never be that day when they went to school. It will never be like that again, and that's a shame for me, because I think because these are people, they didn't all of a sudden just start having sex with each other. They didn't sit there and talk about celebrities. They were talking about shit that was very personal to themselves. Obviously, they had to take something to kind of get that out. I mean, they got some marijuana, and that opened them up a little bit. But they were dealing with stuff, and it's one of the biggest things when you're going through high school. Now, I said I wasn't popular, but I had friends. We all were a little bit different. But those are the same guys today that if I had to call them, they would come here. No question whatsoever. And they would be there. I don't know that people really have that anymore. And I think that that's part of the community. And I think a lot of it is related to our culture. And I'm willing to say that our culture is based on the race that we have. We can say that you can have other people that will assimilate into the culture, and they might be a different race. But the innate trust that we have for our people, is evident in this movie. Yes, they yell at each other. Yes, they hate each other during the movie. But by the end of the movie, they understand the trust that they have together. And that's a very good message that the movie has. And I just wish that, I think most kids today should watch it. I don't, most of the times they talk about horror movies and stuff like that from the 80s and like, oh, it's not funny at all. I think that type of movie would actually resonate with young men today and young people today. That's my dog. He wants to go out and eat, so I know I'm going to pee. So I'm going to end it right here. Let me know what you think about the movie. Maybe I've overblown it. I think that it's a seminal movie of the time. Obviously, it affected me. And I think it could be useful trying to waking up our people. You guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.